Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 49, Henderson versus Dos Anjos, taking place this Saturday in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm actually really excited for this card. I think this is a good, high quality, free Fight Night card. Of all the Fight Night cards we've gotten this summer, the ones on Fox Sports 1, I think this is probably the best. Way better than last week's event, Bader versus St. Preux, and the Fight Pass card this weekend. Also this weekend, Bisping versus Lee. I think that's just completely overshadowed by this. A lot of really fun matchups here. A couple of fights that have been changed because of injury, some late replacement fights. And the original matchups were a lot better. I was very excited for Mike Pyle and Damian Maia, and also Wilson Heiss and Tim Elliott. Some really great matchmaking, but even with the changes, I think it's still a really strong card. A lot of good guys, important guys fighting here. Really good Fight Night card. This is definitely one to watch if you're a casual fan. And with that being said, let's jump right into the predictions. Starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card, 2 prelim fights on Fight Pass. And this first fight, I just noticed that this was opening the Fight Pass prelim card, looking at the card here. But at featherweight, Max Blessed Holloway taking on Clay Collard. This was one of the late replacement fights, actually. Mirsad Bektik was supposed to fight Holloway, and this was just recently changed, I think, yesterday or within the last few days. But so basically a week out from the fight, Clay Collard stepping in to take on Max Holloway. And I don't know anything about Clay Collard, a newcomer. Looking at his record, the only name on there I recognize is Justin Buckles. But Max Holloway, a great fighter. And what is he doing opening the UFC Fight Pass, or opening this Fight Night card on the Fight Pass preliminary card? Just terrible decision making there and card placement by the UFC. I've followed Max Holloway's UFC career from the beginning, and I think this guy's really talented. I think he's definitely going to be top 10 one day. And he just came off of a win, opening a pay-per-view main card and getting a finish, and now he's opening the Fight Pass preliminary card. Just really terrible. And for people who don't understand that, the current UFC business strategy, running all these cards and really weak pay-per-view cards, the people that think this doesn't have an effect, just look at that. It shows that they're just throwing these guys on, any card, any portion of the card, prelims, or like I said, Max Holloway opening a pay-per-view main card on one of the better selling pay-per-views, John Jones and Glover Teixeira, and now he's just buried on this Fight Night card on the Fight Pass portion. Really dumb and doesn't make any sense. But anyway, enough with the rant. Get into the fight. Max Holloway, I'm definitely taking him, especially considering the Clay Collard is taking this on a week notice. Max Holloway, very talented striker, an orthodox striker. In his last fight against Andre Fili, took him a while to really get going, but in that third round late, finished with a guillotine choke, showing he's adding submission abilities to his game. Really good at jumping on guys when they're hurt. Great example of that was in the Justin Lawrence fight a couple years ago, and also in the Will Chope fight. Holloway, really talented, aggressive striker, and should have gotten the win over Dennis Bermudez. He got robbed in that fight. Everyone knows it, and look how great Bermudez is doing now. Definitely beat Bermudez in that fight. So Max Holloway real high on that guy, and I think he's going to get a finish here. I would have preferred to see him fight Mirsad Bektik, who I didn't know much about, but he had one fight in the UFC already, coming off of a win, and there was some hype around him, I think. And I think fighting Max Holloway would have been, a bigger measuring stick than fighting Chad Skelly in his first fight. But anyway, excited to see Max Holloway and look for him to be impressive here and get the finish. Taking Max Holloway by TKO. And next up on the Fight Pass preliminary card at flyweight, Wilson Reis taking on Joby Sanchez. Another fight altered because of injuries. This was supposed to be Wilson Reis and Timothy Elliott, which would have been just a fantastic matchup. Two good grapplers. Really excited for that fight. Again, fell out. Joby Sanchez, don't know anything about him. He's undefeated looking at his record. But Wilson Reis, a guy to keep an eye on, kind of a guy flying under the radar at flyweight. He beat Ivan Menjivar in his debut at 135, I believe. 135. And then against Yuri Alcantara in his last fight. That was a really competitive fight, back and forth. Reis actually dropped him in the first round, dropped him on the feet, and there was some real good grappling exchanges and scrambles in that fight. Wilson Reis, very decorated jiu-jitsu guy, so real strong grappler, and I think he's world class. Alcantara, one of the elite guys, becoming one of the elite guys at 135. I don't think the weight cut should affect him too much. We've seen some guys from bantamweight dropping down to flyweight. Hasn't panned out well for them at all. Scott Jorgensen, Brad Pickett, but Wilson Reis, I think he is pretty underrated, and I expect him to get the win here over the newcomer Joby Sanchez. So I'm taking Wilson Reis. And next up, moving on to the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card, and I was really critical of these Fox Sports 2 prelims last week with the Bayer versus St. Preux card, and I won't get into that here again, but I just think it's really stupid putting these prelim cards on a channel that almost no one gets. The only people that are going to be tuning in for UFC fights on Fox Sports 2 are going to be the hardcore fans, who, not even all of them have Fox Sports 2. This is in no way, going to get casual fans, people flipping through the channels. Nobody's going to, come across fights on Fox Sports 2, at least not very many at all that'll have an impact. It just seems really dumb to me. I really don't like it. I thought they moved on from Fox Sports 2 and the old Fuel era, but whatever. First fight opening the Fox Sports 2 prelim card at welterweight, Ben Saunders taking on Chris Heatherly. Chris Heatherly, another newcomer, don't know anything about him. Ben Saunders, I remember a couple of his fights in the UFC before he was released. I remember him fighting John Fitch. I think I also saw him fight Dennis Hallman, lost both of those fights. I'm not going to make a pick here. I haven't followed Ben Saunders outside of since he was released from the UFC last. Looking at his record here, looks like he's had 3 losses. Let's see, 8-3 since last time he was in the UFC, which was in 2010. So he's been away for a while. And I haven't watched his fights like I said, but I'm going to be rooting for him. Hope he does well, but I don't have any analysis to offer here. So moving on at bantamweight, Aaron Phillips taking on Matt Hobar. 2 guys coming off of their debut losses. Aaron Phillips losing to Sam Sicilia, where I actually thought he looked decent for a newcomer. I think he's a Taekwondo stylist. Sam Sicilia was able to out-wrestle him pretty much, but couldn't do much else. I remember Phillips landing a good body kick at one point, also landing a good knee to the body that stunned Sicilia. And on the ground, was even able to get a few reversals at some points throughout the fight. Couldn't maintain top position and really lost the fight being on his back. And Matt Hobar took on Pedro Munhoz and just got ran over, TKO'd early in the first round. So don't know much about these guys. Only one fight in the UFC for both of them, and that's all I'm going off of here. But I think Aaron Phillips looked a little better in his fight, and I think he has a little more to offer. Although I think Matt Hobar took on the much better fighter in Pedro Munhoz. Also, Aaron Phillips dropping down to bantamweight here, fought Sicilia at 145. But I'm still going to take Aaron Phillips. Not going off of much, but both guys have had a fight in the UFC, and I always feel obligated to make a pick when that's the case, so I'm taking Phillips. And next at lightweight, Beneil Dariush taking on Tony Martin. Beneil Dariush had an impressive win over Charlie Brenneman, knocking him down and submitting him early in the first round of their fight. And Tony Martin, a guy that hasn't fought in a while, a lot of people have probably forgotten about him at this point, but took on Rashid Magomedov in his debut, which was I think that was UFC 169. And I just remember, I don't remember a whole lot about that fight. I remember both guys looked pretty tough, went the distance, but I think it was in the first round early. Tony Martin had Magomedov in an armbar that just looked excruciating. Magomedov was screaming in agony, trying to escape the armbar, which he eventually did. And then I believe Tony Martin was just out-grappled and out-wrestled for the rest of the fight, but seemed like a pretty tough, solid grappler. And Beneil Dariush, after his debut win over Brenneman, got crushed by Ramsey Nijum in his fight after that, which I don't think is, looked too good for him. Nijum isn't, a guy I regard as a mid-level fighter rising in the division. Kind of tough one to call, but I think I'm going to take Martin. I just think he looked really tough against Magomedov. This should be a good grappling match. Both guys seem like pretty competent, talented grapplers. But I'm going to go with Martin here. And the last fight on the Fox Sports 2 prelim card at welterweight, a fantastic matchup. A guy who's been on a great tear, really turned a corner in his last couple of fights. Neil Magny taking on Alex Garcia. Neil Magny, after losing to Seth Baczynski last November, I believe it was, and Baczynski, just getting knocked out last weekend by Alan Joban. But Neil Magny has really turned it around. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Looked real good against Tim Means 2 fights ago, and then in his last fight against Rodrigo de Lima, got badly out-grappled in the first round, was mounted. Lima even went for a triangle choke, standing, I believe, and Magny was able to survive that first round, and coming out in the second round, just stormed him, pushed him back, knocked him out. Real impressive. And this is going to be his 4th fight since February, and his 3rd fight since May. So in 4 months, this will be his 3rd fight. Putting in a lot of work, very active. I'm really excited about Neil Magny. I think he's developed very well over his last couple of fights. And Alex Garcia looked real strong against Benoit in his debut, although Benoit, I think, is just, you know, the lowest level of fighter in the UFC, and probably shouldn't even be in the UFC, a veteran of tough smashes. But Alex Garcia knocked him out with an uppercut in their fight. And then his last fight against Sean Spencer, a guy who I wasn't high on at all. I didn't think he looked good. Sean Spencer against Drew Dober. Against Drew Dober in his fight before that, and it also lost pretty convincingly to Rafael Natal. And that was actually a really competitive fight. Both guys dropped each other, and Alex Garcia had to rely on his wrestling and takedowns to win that fight. I think Magny's going to be way too technical, a lot more technical than Sean Spencer. It showed in his last fight. He's now added power to his striking. And Garcia could out-wrestle Magny. He could get him down. I don't think he'll hold Magny down, though. I mean, that's possible, but, you know, Magny's lost. He's had trouble with jiu-jitsu guys. You know, Rodrigo de Lima in his last fight, and getting submitted by Sergio Moraes, who's a very dangerous grappler. So I don't think, you know, Garcia, I don't think has those submission skills at, you know, nearly at the same level as those other guys. I don't think he's just going to hold Magny down with position. So I expect Magny to really be dominant on the feet. I think he's going to be too technical. Garcia seems more of just a power puncher looking for the big bomb to land. I'm taking Magny, and I think he could catch Garcia on the feet and put him out at some point. So I'm taking Neil Magny. And on to the Fox Sports 1 main card, starting off with the featherweight fight between Chas Skelly and Tom Niinimaki. I don't like this matchup, but I am excited to see Tom Niinimaki, who debuted very impressively with a very dominant grappling display over Hani Yaya. Looked really dominant with his grappling there. Hani Yaya, you know, regarded as a very talented grappler, and Niinimaki just shut him down. And then his last fight against Nicholas Backstrom, ate a big knee early in that fight, and got submitted with a bulldog choke, breakout win for Nicholas Backstrom. And I don't really like this fight. Chas Skelly, you know, I don't know if he has a lot of hype behind him. He's 11-1, only dropping his last fight to Mirsad Bektic, which was his debut fight in the UFC. And I didn't think he looked, you know, that good in that fight. I don't think he looked terrible. Didn't get dominated. And I really don't remember too much about that fight. Just that Mirsad Bektic, I thought, clearly won the fight. I believe he got some takedowns on Skelly. But Niinimaki seems to be, even with his last loss, getting submitted, I think he still seems to be a really dominant and talented grappler, so I'm taking him to win here. He even got Backstrom down early in that fight before getting hit with that knee and submitted, so I'm taking Niinimaki. And next up, a lightweight, another guy I'm really excited to see again, James Vick, veteran of Tough 15, taking on Walmir Lazaro, who I don't know anything about, and I just want to look up his record real quick to see if there's anything worth noting there. But I am taking James Vick in this fight. Give me just 1 second, guys. Okay, Lazaro, out of Nova Unao, and looks like he's 12-2. No names here that I recognize. Looks like Brazilian circuit. But James Vick, I thought he was pretty impressive on Tough 15. Beat Dakota Cochran to get in the house. Had a good win over what's the guy's name? Joe Proctor, who's done fairly well in the UFC so far, coming off of a knockout win over Justin Salas. And then in his James Vick, in his debut fight, took him a while to get back to the UFC. Took on Ramsey Nijem and just crushed him in the first round. Got that John Jones style power guillotine and put him out quick. I thought that was very impressive, especially with Nijem being a pretty good grappler and wrestler. I thought Vick looked really good there. He lost in the house to the eventual winner, Michael Chiesa, where he was actually dominating that fight, pretty much winning handily. It was outboxing Michael Chiesa, and it was in the third round, or the second round, I think, because it was the Tough House. I think with like 30 or 20 seconds left in the fight, Chiesa took him down, moved right into mount, and pounded him out. So, I think that's definitely his weakness, the ground, but has real solid fundamental boxing, it seems like. And, I don't know anything about Lazaro again, and I would usually not make a pick here, but I just really liked Vick's performance over Nijem, and I'm feeling pretty confident about him, so I'm going to take James Vick to win this fight. Next up, a middleweight, another matchup that I think is really good matchmaking. Francis Carmont taking on Thales Leites. Carmont, for me, the hype around him, I think, is pretty much gone. Coming into the UFC, he had a couple good finishes over Magny, Carlos Vemola, then had a string of 2 fights where he won fights that he should not have, Tom Lawler and Lorenz Larkin. I thought he was outworked in both of those fights clearly and somehow came away with the decision. But then against Costas Philippou, where he showed really dominant wrestling, pretty much lay and pray, but still seemed like a really dominant wrestler and seemed to really use his size to his advantage. Got the win over Philippou, and I thought he was going to be a pretty scary guy after that. But against Jacare Souza, the fight wasn't particularly competitive, although he was never that close to being finished. He was in a rear naked choke at one point, seemed pretty tight, but Jacare couldn't finish it. And then against Holloway, I think dropped him at one point and out-wrestled him for the majority of the fight. I was able to take him down and hold him down. So I think he's shown when he's fighting guys with more skill, he can't quite compete with them. And Thales Leites, I think, has been all about really sound fundamental skills. Seems like a pretty strong wrestler for a Brazilian guy since coming back to the UFC. Had some kind of a lackluster win a bit over Tom Watson. Did outstrike him though and out-wrestled him. And then against Ed Herman, really out-wrestled him and seems to have really good control on the ground. And then in his last fight against Trevor Smith, just stormed him early and knocked him out. So Thales Leites, I think, has been pretty good. His last fight showed finishing ability, which he hadn't before then. Carmont, at this point, I think all he really has is size. He wasn't able to out-wrestle Holloway and Leites, who seems like he's really improved his wrestling. I don't think he'll be able to out-wrestle Leites. And on the feet, Carmont, I don't think has looked really good on the feet since he fought Chris Camozzi, which was his debut fight back in 2011. Was strong in the clinch in that fight. But since then, his striking, he hasn't really shown it. Lorenz Larkin was able to outstrike him, and the rest of his fights have kind of all been contested on the ground. And on the ground, I think Leites, his jiu-jitsu, his position on the ground, I think is just going to be too much for Carmont. So I believe Leites is the underdog here, which surprises me. And with the win streak he's been on, I would have liked to see him fight somebody coming off of a win. Like him and Holloway, I think, would have been a lot better fight. But anyway, I'm taking Leites here. I think he wins a decision. And the co-main event, another fight affected by injury. And the original matchup was, I was very excited for that. Mike Pyle versus Damian Maia. That was the original matchup. I thought that was Mike Pyle, his perfect opportunity to get into the top 10. I wouldn't favor him in that fight, but Mike Pyle, this guy who I thought he was done after he lost to Rory McDonald back in 2011, but was able to take guys out. He had a win streak there where he was, I think he finished 3 guys in the first round. And they keep feeding him these young guys who you think are just too young and too strong for Pyle. Excuse me. And you think Pyle's chin is fading, but every time they feed him one of those young guys, he comes out on top. Rick Story dropped him in their fight, but Pyle, just the old savvy veteran, was able to win that fight. In his last fight, took on TJ Waldberger, a guy who I think is a really talented submission fighter, and Pyle finished him. And he's really old, almost 40. And I keep thinking, that he's 38, and I keep thinking that he's gonna show up to one of these fights and his chin's just gonna be gone. And he has suffered several knockouts before. Matt Brown, Jake Ellenberger, and Rory McDonald. But he keeps hanging in there, and he's taking on Jordan Meehan, coming off of a very lackluster win over Hernani Perpetuo, where I don't think Meehan really looked that good at all. Didn't do too much. Took Perpetuo down, and on the feet was just pretty hesitant, pretty technical, and never really opened up like he did against Dan Miller. But this is a classic Mike Pyle fight, I think. A younger guy in Jordan Meehan who's probably more skilled, carries a little more power. But these are the kinds of guys Mike Pyle beats with his experience. And Mike Pyle has power himself. Put out guys like James Head, Josh Neer, tough guys. And on the ground, Mike Pyle is really crafty and really strong on top. Good top control, good positioning. Showed that against really dangerous grappler Waldberger in his last fight. So I'm going to take Pyle here, though. I don't feel that confident in it, again, with his age and with his past knockout losses. I think he is prone to having his chin cracked. In Jordan Meehan, we have seen, he has power in the Dan Miller fight. And even in the Matt Brown fight, he was pretty competitive, able to hurt Matt Brown on a few occasions in their fight. But I think Pyle's savviness is going to get it done. I think it's going to be a competitive fight. Might be in some trouble at some points. But I'm taking Mike Pyle. And on to the main event, which again, I think is just fantastic matchmaking. Really love this matchup. Lightweight fight, Ben Henderson taking on Rafael Dos Anjos. Ben Henderson finally getting a finish after so long in his last fight against God, what's his name? Sorry. Rustam Khabilov, getting the finish over him in his last fight, which was a pretty competitive fight, and I thought Rustam Khabilov actually showed that he is a really elite lightweight. Maybe not quite top 10 by what his resume indicates, but he really competed well with Henderson on the feet and on the ground. But Henderson landing that lead uppercut, hurting Khabilov, and then finishing him off with the rear naked choke. And Rafael dos Anjos had a pretty impressive finish in his last fight over Jason High, where he was taken down repeatedly early on, but defended really well with Kimuras, with his jiu-jitsu game really threatening, which allowed him to get back to his feet. And every time he got back to his feet, just made the most out of each opportunity, really pressed forward on the feet, and hurt Jason High with, I believe it was a punch to the head. Hurt Jason High, put him out. A bit of a controversial stoppage. Might have been a bit early, but still looked good. And I thought he was definitely going to win that fight. But I am taking Ben Henderson here. I think he's just fought the better guys. Obviously the former champion. And Rafael dos Anjos' weakness has been the wrestling. We saw just a couple fights ago when he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov. Was just put on his back over and over again, and couldn't use his jiu-jitsu there like he could against Jason High. And I think Henderson might not be quite as dominant as Nurmagomedov, but I do think he'll be able to out-wrestle Dos Anjos, and I don't think his jiu-jitsu will be effective enough to make Henderson uncomfortable to the point where he has to stand up. And on the feet, I do give Rafael dos Anjos an advantage there. I think he has better power in his hands. He's he's shown he has knockout power before putting out George Soteropoulos. Really has an aggressive Muay Thai game, good body kicks, good long strikes with power. Can press forward without being reckless, and I don't think Henderson. I don't think it would be wise for him to contest most of this fight on the feet. I think he should really look to use his wrestling and get it down to the mat. Henderson, I'd also give the cardio advantage. And Rafael dos Anjos, I think a bit overrated. Not to say he's a bad fighter. I do believe he's a top 10 guy. But really hadn't finished anyone before his last fight with Jason High, other than you have to go back to George Soteropoulos back in 2011 was the last guy that Dos Anjos finished, and he did get that win over Donald Cerrone, but I thought he caught Cerrone when he was at his lowest point. I thought Cerrone was kind of mentally gone in that period where he fought KJ Nunes, and Rafael dos Anjos just didn't look himself at all. And even fighting guys like Mark Bocek, Anthony Njokuani didn't finish. And actually, I apologize, he did finish Kamal Shalarus after the Soteropoulos fight. But a guy who couldn't get past Gleison Tebow, barely got by Evan Dunham. That was a very razor-thin fight that easily could have gone Dunham's way. I don't think Dos Anjos is quite the contender that everyone makes him out to be. Again, dangerous fighter. I do give him an advantage on the feet here, but I think Henderson's going to win this fight. I don't think he's going to finish Dos Anjos. I think both of these guys taking a big step up from their last fights. For Ben Henderson, going from Khabilov to Khabilov to Dos Anjos, I think a good step up. And also for Dos Anjos going to Jason High to Ben Henderson, obviously a very big step up. So should be a really competitive fight. I am taking Ben Henderson, and I think these are the kind of guys that Henderson should be putting away to be making his case for another title shot, either a rematch with Pettis, or if Melendez wins, a rematch with him. But I really like to see Henderson continue his, getting these finishes. I don't think it happens here, but I'm taking him to win a decision. All right, guys, so those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 49, Henderson versus Dos Anjos. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. I will have my predictions up for Fight Night 48, Bisping versus Lee, the other Fight Pass card taking place this weekend as well. Check out my recap for Bader versus St. Preux. And I'll have predictions next week for 177, Dillashaw versus Barao 2. All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.